Welcome to Athlon U. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me on the internet at Braden Gall.
And I'm Stephen Lassen. You can also get to me on the internet over at athlonsports.com for all of your college football preseason previews, spring news and notes. You can also get to me at Athlon Stephen on Twitter, Stephen L. CFB, Facebook, and Instagram. Also on Blue Sky. Waiting for Braden to start his Blue Sky skeeting again.
I skeeted this week.
Oh.
I did a skeeting. I did the skeeting. I don't know what you say. I don't know how you say it, but that's what I was doing this week. What a great sports week, by the way. You got a Big 12 dream road trip today on the show. We've got the Masters coming up. You got the UEFA's Champions League quarterfinals. You got the national championship game. Congrats to the Florida Gators on Monday night for pulling one out against Houston. Old Kelvin Sampson. My wife keep walking in and going, "Oh, look at he's so cute. He's like a grandpa." I was like, well, Indiana fans are having a tough time watching this right now.
That's pretty painful, though, for Houston, though, to be that
brutal,
close.
Brutal. And my household full of Tennessee Volunteers, of course, rooting openly against the Florida Gators. But congratulations to young Mr. Todd Golden. That investigation disappeared awfully quickly in January. Look, there's not a lot of news this week, so we're going to talk Big 12 Dream Road Trip. And if you're watching on YouTube, please thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, etc., etc. Write a review on the podcast app of choice. We would also appreciate that. And follow us on the socials. Check out athlonsports.com. And you can get this magazine right here, this draft magazine. It's close, Stephen. The draft is coming. There it is. You can get that Athlon Sports Dream, that Athlon Sports magazine right there on newsstands now, or order it on athlonsports.com.
It is a fantastic magazine. It is also significantly contributing to my anxiety because of the college football magazine is due shortly after the NFL draft gets here. So, yes, I'm very excited about the NFL draft. Also slightly concerned about hitting deadlines, as always, as you know all too well.
I'm sure you'll do a great job. All right, so we'll get to Big 12. I just got one quick note, though. First of all, SEC is the best basketball conference and the Big 10 is the best football conference? What?
I mean, the last 2 years proved it, right? The SEC, the Big 10 is a football conference and the SEC is now a basketball conference. So I guess that's just going to be the way it is since Nick Saban left. No, I'm kidding. The SEC will be back on top of college football. Maybe not this year, but it's certainly in years to come. But kudos to the conference for significantly improving on the hardwood in recent years.
This is how much of a weirdo I am about this particular week and how much I enjoy the non-football stuff that's going on. So I'm watching like live driving range coverage from the Masters this morning because I'm a sick and twisted individual. And I'm getting ready to watch the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals, first leg today and tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday. And there's an amateur that was, and sorry for the story, but there was an amateur that was being interviewed on, whatever the live from the Masters coverage was. And he's a Florida grad and he's a Florida fan. And they were like, but you didn't get a chance to see any of the game last night. And he's like, no, because he's at the amateur dinner because he's an amateur. So he's I guess there's an amateur dinner in Augusta on Monday night, I suppose. And the poor guy didn't even get to see his team win a national championship. I was kind of bummed out about that. I was like, man. And if you're an amateur, I'm assuming you just got done playing at Florida, like recently. So I can't remember what his name is, but I felt pretty sad for the guy.
Yeah, that is tough, right? To be playing for the national championship. And it's not like a World Series that it's like one of like potentially 7 games. It's one of one on one night. I guess thank goodness for DVR.
Yeah.
So hopefully nobody was giving him play-by-play updates, for about 50 something minutes in that game.
And they're down 12, right?
Right.
And then a great finish, of course, although minus the final possession there. For Houston, doesn't get a shot up. Anyway, first of all, I felt really bummed. Then I was like, oh, wait, he's going to play in the Masters this week. I'm not that sad for him at all. So anyway, I just kind of thought that was funny. The other thing that I found was funny is that I didn't anticipate the Bay Area being like the epicenter of hilarious and fun and dramatic storylines this offseason, Stephen. What's the news for the week?
Yeah, how about this story? And this goes at sort of a power structure question that you and I have talked about before. And so at Cal, Ron Rivera earlier this offseason. That is former NFL head coach, also former All-American linebacker at Cal, Ron Rivera, was basically hired as the general manager. However, there's a collective, the California Legends Collective, third party, that wants Rivera to hold a role similar to that of Andrew Luck at Stanford. So basically, they will be withholding donations, it sounds like, on NIL fronts until Rivera is given more power over the football program.
Not
So,
not not a collective, the only collective,
yes, that is a
w
good point.
which is important to note because they only have the one, I guess, at Cal. But my favorite quote from the president of this collective, "You don't hire Mario Andretti and then ask him to sit in the
Right.
passenger seat, right?" And I just wanna be like, he's a really smart football guy, and he might be a great general manager, but what exactly does a longtime NFL head football coach know about NIL dollars and how to distribute resources to recruits in 2025? When's the last time Ron Rivera was in college?
I have a theory. Let me float this by you.
All right.
I think this might be the donors of this collective basically saying Rivera would be willing to take football a little bit more seriously, perhaps, or a little bit more emphasis on football than maybe the AD, maybe some the higher ups at the school. So I guess by saying if you give Rivera more power, that's going to be a more emphasis on dollars and donations and giving football more of a prominent space. Essentially, does that make sense?
I guess. I still don't
Yeah.
why does a guy who's never coached in college football, never administered in college football, all of a sudden is like the end all be all that you're going to stop all the donations and cut your nose off to spite your face? And I don't disagree with you. I'm sure the boosters are behind a lot of this, but like Kennedy is like I guess the Kennedy's the guy, the chairman or whatever of this particular collective. Like, but if you're the only one, I don't know. I just think it's the tail wagging the dog a bit on some of this stuff, and some of it is because they haven't they dominated Stanford?
Yeah, recently. The series has been a little bit in favor of Cal recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like an odd. It just strikes me as an odd hill to die on. That's all. I'm not
I
saying Rivera wouldn't be good. He probably will be, but
I think if you're the only collective with California, you probably hold some economic sway essentially. If there was like 3 or 4, it'd be a little different story, but being the only one, and if you're saying, "Hey, we want football to be or take football a little bit more seriously," given the keys to Rivera and allowing him to have more power, more of a say so perhaps. I get the sense there might be some frustration perhaps with some of the higher ups there just from this story and some of the other
is that
things that are out there, but that's not surprising either.
I understand at a school that has lots of Olympic sports to have an athletic director who might be as interested in the other stuff as football. That makes total sense. But what is the general manager of football like? Are you going to give him power over like the women's basketball team and the lacrosse team, like what the volleyball, the water volleyball team, the polo team, like what? I'm just trying to figure out what exactly they think is going to happen
Or
because
is there frustration with Wilcox? Is that
well
the thing?
that would be the and I think they wrote that in the lead like oh you're hearing about a collective trying to exert its will or make the university bend to its will with financial leverage and the first thing you think of is fire a coach. That's the first thing you
Yeah.
think of. And so maybe they think Rivera doesn't like Wilcox or something. I don't know. It just seems so funny to me. It just seems like a weird hill to die on. We want Ron Rivera to be in charge of football more than he already is, and we're gonna keep every penny from you if we don't get it. It just seems odd to me. That's all.
Justin Wilcox is 42-50 at Cal, 2 seasons above 6 victories. They came in 2018 and 2019, but back-to-back bowl games, transition to the ACC. I mean, this is not an easy job.
It's a very
Um,
tough job, as
um,
we're learning by the behavior of the collective.
right. A lot of who like you said, who would have thought we would have spent a chunk of the offseason with power struggle stories, and they involve Andrew Luck, Stanford, Cal, Troy Taylor, potentially Justin Wilcox and Ron
Ron Rivera.
Rivera. What
That's
a
fantastic.
ACC drama, by the way,
Yes, that's
not Pac-12.
That's right. All right, so then let's get to the Big 12 Dream Road Trip featuring all all Pac-12 teams. Okay. All right. So here's the first question, of course, and that is I started this exercise with week 0, which features 2 Big 12 teams, Kansas hosting Fresno and Kansas State versus Iowa State in Dublin. Now, I started this exercise saying, well, look, I'm going to use that game and I'm going to count it towards the 2 I'm allowed to use it for Kansas State and Iowa State. But because it's not at Jack Trice Stadium, I can use Jack Trice Stadium later if I want to. And so I did the whole thing. And then I was like, then I texted you and said, well, do we have to count week 0? So you could, in theory, we're not going to count week 0. You could, in theory, have 3 Kansas States and 3 Iowa States. I do not because I did this for Iowa State and then I changed and added a Kansas State game later. But the rules, of course, you have to see all 18 teams in the Big 12.
16.
Sorry. You got to see all 16 teams in the Big 12. You can only go to each stadium one time, and the max amount of times you can see a team is twice. Sound right?
That is correct. Yeah, I know you're under the weather, but that is 100% accurate there, my friend.
I thought there were 18 teams.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of the day, I would have gone to Kansas State and Iowa State in Dublin either way because I'm on an international travel kick right now, and I would go to Dublin no matter what. I'd go when there's no college football games. But I'm certainly going for what could be one of the most important football games of the entire Big 12 season. Strange that they're doing that, by the way.
I like the idea it's in week 0 because there's not a ton of high-profile games in week 0. But it's week 0. It's the long layoff from the offseason. It's in Ireland, Manhattan, and going to Kansas State and Iowa State stadiums for this rivalry would probably be better. It's a nice road trip for these fans, but at the same time, I'm always a much of a sucker for having all these games on campus.
I just think it's interesting to put such a big game in such a unique setting.
Yeah.
The Georgia Tech Florida State game, we didn't realize it was going to be a big game. It turned into a big game. I feel like there was a Navy USC game or a Navy Notre Dame game that was pretty good a couple of years ago that ended up being important. But like normally you're getting sort of an exhibition style non-conference game. And this is very different. I mean, this is 2 of the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference. It's 2 of the better quarterbacks, if not the 2 best quarterbacks in the conference. Like it is it's a rivalry. So I think it's weird that this is the one that they placed there. I get why, of course, because they want to draw attention to it. So I think we would all pay attention to this if it was like Cincinnati versus UCF, because we're all so craved for football in week 0 that we would watch every second of it. But this one has extra gravity to it. And so I had it on my list, even if the rules were different and we weren't allowed to use week 0 separately.
I think we should just make an exception, and it's like a free space. We get to go to Dublin for week 0 to go check out what could be a important elimination game in the Big 12 for week 0.
And by week 2 of the regular season, Iowa State could be teetering. So we shall see. We'll see in just a second. Okay, week 1, where are you going?
A lot of interesting non-conference games, but I am going to Boulder. I am going to see a rematch, or I guess it's not necessarily a rematch, a game that could have decided a national title in the 1990s. I am going to see Georgia Tech at Colorado, see Deion's team up close in week 1, how far have they progressed. And of course, our Yellow Jackets going to Boulder. Great venue, great sights. Just love this matchup. Give me Georgia Tech at Colorado.
So, 35 years later, we finally get the game to decide the national championship?
Yeah,
is that right?
We could have a flag football game at halftime with all the legends from both teams, maybe.
How many downs does Colorado get?
4. 4 would be, yeah.
Okay.
Nope, not 5, yeah.
Not 5? Okay. That's a really good football game. TCU at North Carolina is really interesting in Bill Belichick's debut. That would be fun to watch. As we did on the Big Ten trip, Utah, UCLA, really good stuff there in that one. I'm going Auburn at Baylor. I do not there's certain games sometimes that have like their own personality in your mind, and this has such a fantastic intrigue for me with Sawyer Robertson and Baylor and the Auburn with their development and growth, and Hugh Freeze under a lot of pressure. Like I just find this game to be absolutely fascinating. So Auburn at Baylor, a true home game. a true SEC Big 12 game on an actual home field. So I'm all over Auburn at Baylor, and I think these are two. I think we've talked about these teams that are in this like 25 to 35 range in the rankings right now. There's a chance that either Baylor or Auburn has a nice catapult off of this game into a really good season. And so I just think it's a really intriguing game. Auburn doesn't go to these kind of places very often, and Baylor doesn't get to host a big time SEC brand like this, even if it is an average Auburn team.
I love it. Friday night game as well. So you're home to check out all the full slate on Saturday. But you mentioned it. I mean, two coaches with something to prove. Very much so for Auburn. Dave Aranda's seat is cooled. A lot of interest in the two quarterbacks and some of the skill talent in this game too. So I love that call. Friday night, Waco should be an interesting game.
Yeah, the Georgia Tech Colorado game is really good though. So I'm with you on that one, especially since Georgia Tech is so high on my list. All right, week 2, where are you going?
This one was easy. I didn't have many games locked in from the start, but give me the border war. Kansas and Missouri getting back together for a non-conference game in Columbia. See Jalen Daniels, see Bo Prabula, see how these two teams are shaping up. So I love the Kansas at Missouri rivalry for week 2.
Great game in terms of balance. Could be a very evenly matched game. Did you factor in the fact that you had the Iowa State game in the Big 10 Dream Road Trip last week? Did you factor that in?
I thought about it, but I didn't. No.
What I mean is the fact that you were going to that one in the Big 10 Road Trip. Did that become a factor in why you didn't choose it this time?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, I say this in a big picture thing here for the Big 12. I think one of the challenges is it is very difficult to see like the top teams twice like you want to. I did this exercise probably 3 or 4 times, and each time I ended up with somebody that got shortchanged. So it's a very difficult puzzle with all the quality of games in the Big 12.
Oh, I didn't. I had a much tougher time last week.
Really?
On the Big 10. Yeah, I've got Arizona State, Kansas State, BYU, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Utah, Baylor, all twice. So I had no problem with that. I'm going to Iowa State in week 2. And I think, and this is not fair necessarily, but I think I was shaded by not going to it last time. And I was like, oh, I'm so bummed I didn't go to that game. Now I definitely want to go. But also it's at Iowa State, And so, 2 Iowa State games in the first 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, I should say, think about that. They're going to play maybe the best team in the conference and their arch rival within 2 weeks, within week 2. And they're like, you lose those 2 games, your whole season has a totally different trajectory. You win those 2 games, we're talking about a return to the Big 12 championship game and a playoff spot again for Iowa State. But man, that is a lot of pressure in a very short period of time for the Cyclones.
I think it'll go a lot better for Iowa State than it did for Florida State, but I am thinking about last year how Florida State lost to Georgia Tech, then they lost to Boston College on Labor Day night, and you're already 0-2 in the ACC. It's a little different for Iowa State, of course, with a conference game in Iowa, but easily they could be 1-2 after week 2, and so you're not necessarily out of the playoff, but man, you'd lose a tiebreaker, you lose to your rival. That's a pretty tough way to start for a team with high expectations.
Which, by the way, they may not be favored in either of those games.
Yeah.
I mean, they could win both of them, but they also may not be favored in either of them. All right, week 3, where are you headed to?
Another easy call. I'm going to the backyard brawl. Give me Pitt at West Virginia. Rich Rodriguez back on the sidelines for West Virginia. Nasty rivalry all around. So I love the backyard brawl. That's where I'm headed week 3.
I'm with you, dude. I'm right there with you. And especially when you're picking a team that does not have, like, this is why the Northwestern game last week was so important for me, because it's like, no, I want to see a fall game that's not too cold against a team that's going to be like evenly matched. The beauty of this exercise when it comes to the quote unquote bad teams, and West Virginia may be better this year, but like Rich Rod with that offense on this team and in a rivalry game in Morgantown, no question, sign me up. So I'm there with you, dude. I'm right there with you. I like your first 2 picks, but I'm right there with you in week 3.
I've got another rivalry game coming for week 4. So
I actually like you got the Holy War on here. You got the battle for the Iron Skillet. I assume you're talking about. You got Baylor TCU. There's the Territorial Cup. You could just load up on rivalries in the Big 12.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to get this. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute. Brett Yormark has done a lot of good things for the Big 12, but your Week 14 schedule really needs some work. We've got to talk about the rivalries in Week 14. We've got to redo this schedule. We've got to get the matchups a little bit better than. I mean, I love Arizona at Arizona State, but come on, Cincinnati at TCU, Utah, Kansas. We're not exactly lighting up the rivalry scorecard there.
Are you suggesting that UCF and BYU are not longtime arch rivals?
I That's a bit of a stretch, don't you think?
I mean, if the Utah game and the BYU game that week are so bad, why are they not playing each other?
I mean, I think BYU and Utah would be a much better Week 14 game, don't you? I
What
mean,
about Baylor and TCU?
right? Shouldn't that would be a perfect Texas Tech and Houston? Uh, or I mean, Houston plays Baylor that week, so they're sort of
That kind of
geographic.
counts, yeah.
Yeah,
But Kansas State,
should be Week 14.
you can put that one in there. Okay, all right. I see your point. You're right. That's a bad slate, which is why I'm going where I'm going that week. Okay, so you're going to SMU TCU? Is that where you're going?
Absolutely. I'm going to SMU at TCU. So I had trouble actually slotting in TCU. It just happened to work out this way that this was the easiest place for me to get TCU. So going to another rivalry game, third straight week, give me SMU at TCU.
This was sort of a throwaway game for me. Not that sounds bad, but I wanted it because it's intrigue, and that is North Carolina at Central Florida. I needed to get UCF into the schedule. They could be the worst team in this conference, at least in the preseason. And the idea of getting to see Belichick against UCF, early in the year, maybe it's a little hot for my taste down in Orlando, but that it could. I just wanted to see UCF in an interesting situation, and I think hosting an ACC opponent with Belichick, I just think that was interesting to me. So I don't know how good North Carolina is going to be. They could be solid. Um, and I think UCF's probably better than picking them dead last would make you feel like about them. But I just thought, if I'm going to get UCF on here, I might as well get them in an interesting non-conference game because they're the one that doesn't have, like, you can, to your point, you can shoehorn in like a Cincinnati, West Virginia rivalry from like the past, right? You can
Right.
shoehorn in the Pac-12 rivalries from the past. You can even shoehorn in the Texas rivalries with Houston. There's no way to shoehorn in UCF with anything. It's just UCF down there in Florida. But I like that stadium and I like that team and I like the idea of North Carolina playing in Orlando on week 4.
Bounce House, Bill Belichick,
Yeah.
interesting North Carolina team, a lot of unknown for UCF. I see it. I like the
Yep.
call.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Where are you going? Week 5.
I am going to Stillwater to see Baylor at Oklahoma. So Baylor, oddly enough, was another team that I had a hard time slotting in, just the way some of the dominoes fell. But a lot of intrigue to see what Mike Gundy's team looks like this year after the debacle last year. Also think, Stillwater, Boone Pickens Stadium, interesting place. Baylor, high hopes this year. But going on the road in the Big 12 is always tricky. So I am headed to Stillwater.
I am with you. I am with you in Stillwater for Oklahoma State hosting Baylor. I agree. It's one of those road trips in the Big 12 that you and I have been talking about for so many years now with the new Big 12 that you're like, well, it's not going to be any elite teams, but man, everybody could beat everybody on any given Saturday. And the fact that Oklahoma State was so bad last year, you have to think that they'll be slightly better this year. But team games like this are games you have to win if you want to compete for a Big 12 championship spot. And Baylor has eyes on that this year. And so if Baylor can go up on the road early in the year, early in the conference slate, and they can win against a brand that is generally bigger and better than them, and they don't have to beat them handily, but win a game like that, that's a pretty big statement, I feel like, for Baylor. So I'm with you. And I had a tough time getting Oklahoma State in. I had no problem getting Baylor in. Oklahoma State will play. Like, here's the problem. Like, they get is Iowa State, Kansas State. They're going to host both of them. They're going to host Baylor as well, as we talked about. They go to Oregon, which I thought about. But, they're going to play UCF. They do play Texas Tech, but that's on the road, so they're probably an underdog there. Some of these games are going to be good for Oklahoma State. We just don't know which ones.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think Oklahoma State's one of the bigger mysteries in the Big 12 right now, just because they have so many new players and they have a revamped coaching staff. with Todd Grantham calling the defensive signals. Doug Meacham, longtime offensive assistant, is hired to take over the play calling duties. But I think in general, it just feels like when you have this clustering of top teams, like when they're going on the road, like a Baylor to Stillwater, we're not going to, we'll have an idea a little bit about Oklahoma State because they're going to play Oregon. But just seeing some of these top teams on the road, good environments, makes for an interesting matchup for week 5.
Yeah, and it's sort of like teams in this conference. You're either in the quarterback, the haves or the have-nots, right? Like, Texas Tech, Baylor, Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, BYU, Arizona, even, and TCU, all really good quarterbacks. The other ones have some questions. What's interesting is Oklahoma State's going to play Arizona, Houston, Cincinnati, Kansas, UCF. All of those teams would be outside of Kansas, I guess, would kind of be considered bottom half teams, right? Cincinnati, Arizona, UCF, Houston. So they could come up with a few wins this year. This game, I don't know. By the way, Story Robertson, almost 12 yards per attempt last year, 3 touchdowns in this game against Oklahoma State. So should be good. Should be fun to watch. I'll be there with you. Stillwater's just a great place to go watch a game too.
And early in the season, there's a chance for this Oklahoma State team to maybe not be so good. Maybe earlier in the year, they're keeping the team together, and Gundy is under pressure, of course, to win right away this year.
Okay. Week number 6. Where are you going?
I am going back on the road to see another potentially ranked team play an underdog. I am going to Houston to see Texas Tech. I am fascinated by this Red Raiders team this year because of the investments in the transfer portal to see how all of that pays off. So give me Texas Tech at Houston, week 6.
Interesting. I've got Texas Tech in here twice. And one of the biggest games of the year, I feel like, in the conference is one I've got circled for a little bit later on. I'm going Colorado at TCU, but I want to talk about Houston real fast. How do we feel about Houston's slow? It's going to be a slow build, and then they're going to be like good, like permanently after that. What are your thoughts on the slow build this year for Houston?
I think they're going to be a lot better. So first of all, they have Connor Wigman transferring in at quarterback. They have upgraded at offensive coordinator with Slade Nagel taking over. He was the Tulane offensive coordinator a couple years ago, did a nice job. If you go back and look at some of Houston's games last year, they actually had a pretty good defense. I mean, their record was 4-8, but their defense actually held their own. They only averaged 14 points a game offensively. So they have made a heavy investment in the transfer portal on the offensive side of the ball. So I think, like you said, slow burn, getting a little bit better. They've got a guy at quarterback I think is pretty talented. Willie Fritz, year over year, I think is going to get this program better. So I think Houston's going to be pretty pesky, and I think they're going to take a step forward this year.
That's kind of how I think they could be better than Colorado and have them they could be the top 10 in this conference, but I think they have to be better than Colorado to do that. I'm not sure because I do think I do think there's a top half and a bottom half in this league.
Yes, I agree with that.
Let's see, Houston. What other games will Houston have this year that could be tricky for someone? They will play at Arizona State. I mean, they can win a lot of these games. UCF, West Virginia, Arizona. They play a lot of Oklahoma State. They play all the bottom teams. At Baylor, they don't play. They play Arizona State, but they miss. Am I wrong? They miss BYU, Kansas State, Iowa State, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
No, you got the Texas Tech game. There you go. Okay. Houston's a really interesting team this year. Colorado, TCU. So we're same question for Colorado. I mean, they're losing so much.
Yeah, they are. But I also think there's sort of a, I guess, kind of a baseline that this team has now. I kind of almost think that with what Deion's been able to do from the high school, now transfer ranks, it feels like the foundation's pretty solid. Caden Salter or Julian Lewis, whoever wins the job, they're going to be probably okay at quarterback. They also got better on defense last year, too. So I think asking them to contend for the Big 12 title, given the fact they lose their 2 best players and they came up short last year, it's probably a lot. But I also think in this conference, it's going to come down to a handful of close games, and they should be right there somewhere in the top half of the conference.
There's something interesting about Colorado at TCU I just the uniform combination is really interesting to me. I would have preferred to have gone to Boulder. I would love a trip to Boulder. There's some really interesting games for Colorado at home this year, of course. Um, as they'll host Arizona State later in the year, which is a big one, and Iowa State in the middle of the year, and BYU. So they're going to have an impact potentially on the championship race. They play all the tough teams. They got to go to Utah and then at TCU here, and TCU could be sneaky good. So
Mm-hmm.
there's something about Colorado TCU. A helmet game seems like an interesting matchup for me. I think it's two teams right in the middle of the conference, and so the winner of that game early in the year could easily send themselves up for a run into the conference. And these games in this league there's gonna be so many tiebreakers. So you got to win these kind of games where you're like a slight favorite at home. TCU, you got to win those kind of games.
Also, it was the TCU Colorado game a few years ago was Dion's debut. They pulled off that upset against
That's right.
TCU. So
Maybe that's what I
always,
was.
yeah, a
That's what I
little
was remembering.
intrigue there.
All right, where are you going? Week 7.
All right, I feel like there was not many. I guess we call them tent pole games for this exercise, but I thought this was one of them.
Okay.
I am going to Salt Lake City, Arizona State at Utah, top ranked, probably the preseason favorite by most, Arizona State. I think Utah is going to be a lot better. Love Salt Lake City, love the stadium and the environment. So give me Arizona State at Utah.
I am with you. One of the first games I put down on the schedule was Arizona State at Utah. If you're looking at games for Arizona State, they have to play all the tough teams, but they got to play at Baylor, they got to play at Utah, they got to host TCU, they got to host Texas Tech. They're gonna go to Iowa State. They go to Colorado. The only one they miss, I believe, is Kansas State. That this game is enormous for Arizona State, and I don't think Arizona State is as clear cut the top of the league as they were last year. Although I guess that shouldn't be said because it was like 6 teams trying to get into the Big 12 championship game. But I thought old Pac-12 Mountain Air. Give me Arizona State at Utah. I don't know what Utah's going to be from a quarterback standpoint yet. I know they're going to try to run the football with the New Mexico transfer, but I don't know where to put Utah. I think they could be pretty good. I think they could be a top 5 team in this conference, but this is where they got to prove it against a team like Arizona State.
I think considering how wide open the Big 12 is going to be, the fact that
Yeah.
Arizona State has all those tough road games is probably going to make it difficult to repeat. But also, I think it would not shock me at all if Utah made a run at the conference championship game. They're just too well coached, too good defense, and I think they'll figure things out offensively this year.
Does Arizona State play the same kind of way as they did last year, just physically imposing their will on people on offense, or does it transition more to a Levitt run offense?
It's a good question. I think they're probably more geared towards Sam Levitt this year. I think they're going to be fine at running back, but probably more quarterback driven.
Yeah. A lot of good games coming up in week 8. A lot of interesting potential rivalries here. Where are you going in week 8?
A lot of interesting games, but this one is, I think, a slam dunk, kind of the tent pole. It's the Holy War, Utah BYU, one of my favorite rivalries. Getting out to Provo to see this in person. So give me Utah at BYU for week 8.
I am surprised by week 8 and if you count week 0, I guess 5 times we're going to be at the same game. I find that to be interesting. I'm right there with you, Utah and BYU. Great uniform game, great helmet game, great rivalry, great atmosphere, great social media trolling before and after. Just fantastic. It's just fantastic. I love everything about this game. Both stadiums are great. I think being in Provo is even better potentially, but they're both great. And so I'm with you. Holy War. And this year, I mean, tiebreaker for the Big 12 championship game is not out of the question.
I thought you were going to say, hopefully not decided on some controversial pass interference on 4th down and all that stuff. But also
True.
We should also note, week 8 also includes Texas Tech at Arizona State,
A huge game.
Baylor at TCU,
Big
this
game.
Utah and at BYU. So you get 3 massive matchups that could decide a spot in the Big 12 championship potentially in week 8.
Yeah, it's a big one for tiebreakers for sure. And in-state rivalry, bragging rights. I'm going in-state bragging rights and rivalry the next week. Where are you going the next week?
I'm staying with the rivalry. I am going to Kansas to see Kansas State at Kansas. Avery Johnson, Jalen Daniels, Lance Leipold, Chris Kleiman, 2 of the best coaches in the country. I think it sounds like we'll be at the same place. So I look forward to seeing you at Kansas State at Kansas.
I will be there, and because it's on the road, the underdog at home in a rivalry game always makes the game more interesting. And so, sign me up for. I think Kansas State might be the best team in this league. I think they probably are. I know you're an Arizona State guy. I would lean Kansas State, so I've got Kansas State on my schedule 3 times because of the first week. But on the road against Kansas in a rivalry game, these are that is a huge moment and a huge game for Kansas and Kansas State. End of October, Halloween. Yeah, baby, let's go.
I think I am the elusive, undecided voter on the Big 12 right now. So
Are
I know
you?
you said Arizona State. I have not made my mind up on that
Oh,
one.
you haven't? Okay.
No.
I think we already had this conversation. Like, we're too low on like 4 teams and too high on 4 teams, but they're all basically even, so it's impossible
Right.
to know. I like Kansas State and I don't want to say Texas Tech right now, but I kind of like those two. But Texas Tech, I'm not ready to buy all the way in yet. You know what I mean? It feels like we're not quite all the way there yet.
I'm interested. I am Texas Tech curious about a trip to the Big 12 championship game this year, but they have to play at Utah. They have to play at Arizona State, at Kansas State. They get BYU in Lubbock. I don't love the road schedule there for Texas Tech, but I like the team coming back and I like the staff upgrades.
Yeah, like I'm pulling up the standings for last year, just because. What is this? 1, 2, 4, 7 teams between 7-2 and 6-3.
I mean, they were 6-3 in the Big 12 last year,
I
so they're not that far off from
that's one more win, and that's it. Not a bad game in the non-conference.
lost by 1 to TCU, lost to Baylor, lost to Colorado, and both those games were a little bit more one-sided. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not crazy.
they're all going to be the same. They're all going to be the same.
Yeah.
Okay, where are you going? Week 10. Tell me you're with me. Tell me you're with me.
I think we're going to be at the same spot. Arizona State at Iowa State. It is a massive, massive Big 12 showdown, a rematch of the Big 12 championship game, a potential preview of the Big 12 championship game this year. So give me the Sun Devils at the Cyclones.
Look, I hope it's a rematch, and I hope it's a better game. Although wasn't there some bad calls in that first quarter against Iowa State? Anyway, people don't forget. I wanted to go to that game really badly, but I wanted the Cy-Hawk Trophy early in the year, so I couldn't go to Iowa State twice. I think this other game is just as big. Honestly, these are 2 of the biggest games of the entire year. Texas Tech at Kansas State is where I'm going. And if you're talking about looking at 2, 3 teams, maybe 4 in the top, so how about this? Arizona State, Kansas State, BYU, Iowa State, Texas Tech. I think those 5 are the top tier. Then I think there's a Utah, Baylor, TCU, Kansas, Colorado, Houston tier. And then there's a bottom tier. This is one of the few games where 2 of the top tier teams are playing against each other. And I'm going Texas Tech at Kansas State. I think it's fantastic. By the way, Texas Tech did not play BYU or Kansas State last year, 2 teams that might be considered championship contenders this year, if not favorites to be in the title game. So BYU, and there's a reason I'm bringing that up. But Texas Tech at Kansas State, 2 great quarterbacks. Sign me up on that one.
I think again, this is the challenge for the Big 12. It's hard to sit here in April and predict like who's going to be for sure good, but some of these weeks have like some clustering of games. I mean, you mentioned that the Texas Tech game, outside of that, for this week, those are the 2 marquee games in the Big 12, the Arizona State at Iowa State and Texas Tech at Kansas State. So I wish these were separated a little bit, but I love the call to see 2 potential favorites there in Manhattan.
Well, and to your point, on paper, those 2 games look really important. But what happens if like West Virginia at Houston becomes more important than we think, or Cincinnati at Utah is more important than we think? I mean, there's so many games in this league that just aren't that different, and that's a compliment and sort of a knock all at the same time, right?
Yeah, I think West Virginia and Houston both have the potential to be a lot better in November and late October. So, yeah, I think that kind of gets at what I was hinting at is like it feels, I think we know who's going to be good, but by November, these teams could look a lot different and also could factor into some of the 5-4, 6-3s to get to the top of the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, the game you're at, Arizona State, Iowa State, could be the most important regular season game of the season, so I'm not going to deny that. I chose to go to Utah earlier, and then again I chose Iowa State against Iowa. So, all right, Big 12, week number 11, November 8th. Where are you going? There's two really good games this week, and then a couple other really intriguing ones.
I am finally getting to see Texas Tech a second time. I am going to Lubbock to see BYU play Texas Tech. We saw BYU play Utah in week 8. We get them a few weeks later here. I think it's a game that could have a lot of importance in the Big 12 title race.
Yep, for all those same reasons. Very important game. Two good quarterbacks. Important in the standings. Great contrast on the field with the white and the blue and the black and the red. Just a great contrast there from a uniform standpoint. I'm the same game. BYU and Texas Tech. I'm right there again. I'm going Texas Tech back-to-back weeks, and I think it's because you got to see Texas Tech twice if you can. These are two really, really important games against two teams, quote unquote, ahead of them in the standings right now, according to our rankings. And again, just prove it if you can. And frankly, Texas Tech did not play either of these two teams last year. So it's gonna be something new in the Big 12 for the first time between these four teams, or these three teams, I should say.
BYU has not played in Lubbock since 1940.
Holy smokes, really?
Yes. So a lot has changed since then, but a game that by November is probably going to mean a lot for the Big 12 title race.
And you never know about weather out there in November in West Texas.
True. Yeah.
You never know about that. All right, I'm just going to tell you you're going to have a better game than me in Week 12. But go ahead.
I'm not so sure because I actually had to punt the next 2 weeks to make sure I got to all of the teams. I'm going Arizona at Cincinnati. We had to see them. We had to see both of them. Perhaps by November, Arizona will have improved. Same thing for Cincinnati. If anything, we get to see Noah Fafita. We get to see Brendan Sorsby, two pretty solid quarterbacks in this game.
I am with you. I'm Arizona and Cincinnati. I actually am seeing Arizona twice this year, which is crazy, but that's because I wanted some rivalry at the end there. But yeah, this was sort of I have to have two of these teams on my list. So is Cincinnati the place I'd love to go? Probably not. I'd much rather this game be in Tucson, but it's all right. I'm there. I'm right there with you. Arizona and Cincinnati. I don't have a lot to add to this game. I wanted to see Fafita. I don't mind. I think Arizona probably takes a slight step back this year or forward this year.
I was going to say it's going to be hard to take a step back after last year.
Bouncing. I should have said bouncing back is what I should have said.
How about this? It is a game in November where two coaches that are squarely on the hot seat should be desperate to win. That's the storyline for November 15th.
There you go. Sold. All right, week 13, where are you going?
Well, I had to punt again. I almost did what you did and went to North Carolina at UCF, but I went to Oklahoma State at UCF because I had to get UCF in here. So I'm seeing Oklahoma State twice. Maybe I'm seeing the final games of the Mike Gundy era, but it may be also UCF finds its rhythm under Scott Frost, and by November, they are a lot better. But Oklahoma at UCF, week 13.
Oklahoma State, yeah.
Oklahoma State, sorry.
What if he's retired by then?
I mean,
could he resign? Could he announce his resignation in the middle of the year and be like, "I'll resign at the end of the year"? And this is like his, I guess it would be his last home game would be the final week of the regular season, I guess. So this would be his. I'm just saying, there could be changes by this game.
I could buy that. Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but just the sheer amount of personnel losses that Oklahoma State has this year, and also how much they've overturned the roster via the portal and the coaching staff. I mean, you go down, they've lost Ollie Gordon, they've lost 3 of their top receivers, their entire offensive line is gone, several of their top defenders. I mean, we could keep going. There is a ton of pressure on Mike Gundy this year, especially when you take a pay cut and you have to overhaul your staff. And I think on the UCF side of things, I'm interested to see if Scott Frost can run this back. Like, can he find that success that he had the first time around? Another team that's also losing quite a bit from last year too.
Yeah, very interesting stuff for UCF. I sort of believe in Scott Frost to do a good job there. It's sort of like Rich Rod. When you go up and then you get fired, then you come back down. A lot of times It works. So I'm going TCU at Houston. I just think that's a really interesting potential middle tier game that could decide a lot of bowl or pecking order there. Could decide which team. I don't think either of these two teams are fighting for a Big 12 championship spot, but I do think they could be fighting for like that, like a. Are we in the top tier? Are we 6-3 and competitive? And like how we define the season for both of those would be I think a really good season. And two in-state schools going like this, they kind of have been running parallel tracks with each other over the course of the last like 50 years. So I don't know. I just think TCU at Houston's a nice little interesting in the state of Texas kind of matchup. It's a good way to get TCU and Houston on your schedule and to do it in sort of a competitive way. So that's sort of what I was going with TCU and Houston. You got Wigman versus Hoover. Should be good.
TCU is interesting. 6-3 in the Big 12 last year. Their schedule this year, they get Arizona State, Kansas State, and BYU on the road. They get Iowa State and Colorado at home. So they get most of the top teams on their schedule. I think this is a team that can be a contender, but their schedule is hard. And also, I think this trip that you've picked out to Houston, there will be some of these games where some of these top teams get picked off. So you add already a very difficult schedule to go with a tricky game at Houston, a Houston team that I think is going to be a lot better. And that could be a kind of a trap game for TCU, if you will.
Yep, absolutely. All right, where are you going in the final week?
I started the season by seeing Colorado. I am closing the season by seeing Colorado. Colorado at Kansas State. It's an old Big 12 North rivalry. So I will take to see the Wildcats maybe potentially clinch a trip to the Big 12 championship game, see what Colorado looks like by December, and see how Dion's team is progressing.
Okay, I like that. I like that. I like where your head's at on that. What if it's a blowout?
Well, this gets at the problem I mentioned a little bit ago, which is the first time that I did this exercise, I actually picked Arizona at Arizona State because it was one of the few rivalries on the schedule. Utah at Kansas was pretty interesting, but I also saw Kansas at home play Kansas State. There just wasn't a ton of options here. So I had to see
Hmm.
Kansas State a second time. I wanted to see Colorado a second time.
Okay. Okay.
So that's kind of why that one fell into place.
So I'm Arizona at Arizona State. I'm the Territorial Cup,
Yep.
and I'm down there having a good time. I wanted to go to Tempe for a home game for Arizona State, and so that's why I'm there. Um, what I think is interesting. So you said you had a tough time getting the best teams on there twice. Do you know who you missed a second time? Do you have that list handy by any chance?
I believe one of those is TCU.
Okay, so I
Um,
saw I saw Arizona State twice. I saw Kansas State twice. I saw BYU twice. Iowa State, Texas Tech, Utah, Baylor, and TCU all twice.
I did not see Utah a
One,
second
two,
time.
three, four. That's the
Utah and
top.
TCU.
That's the
Yeah.
top 8. I saw Kansas once, Colorado once, Houston once, West Virginia once, Cincinnati once. So I found it once I did the Arizona State thing at the end. There's better games for Arizona State, but a lot of them are on the road. You're not going to Tempe, right?
Right.
You're at Utah and at Iowa State, two great games. And we don't have, of course, the one to note here is that's not on the schedule is Kansas State and Arizona State. Right
Yeah.
now, the two top teams in the conference, according to the betting favorites and the odds and everything. So, should be interesting to keep an eye on there. I did not have a different like Colorado at TCU, TCU at Houston, Baylor at Oklahoma State. I just think those are not top tier games, but they're very interesting to me. And I think this conference is going to once again show us this year that of all the leagues, it's the hardest to predict. It's the most volatile from week to week, from season to season. You're not going to know who's great going into the season. You're not going to know who's great in the middle of the season. And it's going to come down to the final weekend where 6 teams have a shot at the Big 12 championship game. And I think that's what's going to happen again this year. And it makes for really good football.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I think it is.
Good entertainment, maybe is
It,
what I should say. Maybe not great football, but great entertainment.
I think there's great football. I think there's good quarterbacks. There's interesting coaches. I mean, I think there's several top 25 teams potentially in this league. There's going to be several games that are probably high scoring. You're going to get your defensive slugfest a couple times in there. So, this is a really interesting league, top to bottom. And I think what we saw last year will play out again. A lot of close games, decided at the margins, a lot of 6-3s, maybe some 7-2s at the top. So I hate to be boring and say, well, that happened last year. It's likely to happen again. These teams are just so clustered together, which I think is going to bring up a repeat of last year's conference title race.
Well, and think about the high profile nature of some of these coaches. Deion Sanders, Rich Rodriguez, Mike Gundy, right, who just absorb all the headlines even when they're not trying to. And then you have like this other style of coach. And it seems like there's a whole group of them here. You got Willie Fritz, you got Chris Kleiman, you got why am I drawing a blank on my guy at Kansas?
Lance
Oh my God,
Leipold.
Lance Leipold, unbelievable. Like Kenny Dillingham is in the other group, right? He's in the I grab all the headlines group. Dave Aranda strikes me as one of those guys that just like goes about his business. He's all ball all the time. Sataki, same thing. Like it's just a very straight. You got a retread in Rich Rod and Scott Frost. It's just a very interesting collection of quarterbacks, teams, programs, expectations, and coaches.
Definitely. I mean, it's really got it all, and it also gets at the thing that you and I have talked about, which is who's going to be that wild card team. Like we think Utah's got a pretty good chance at it. You liked
TCU, Baylor.
TCU, you liked Iowa State last year. I was a little bit higher in Arizona State than most, not high enough, obviously, after they won the Big 12 championship. But this league, while there may not be a team that is capable of going far in the playoff, this will be very high in the list of entertaining week to week with great personalities, good quarterbacks, and
Yeah.
probably a lot of entertaining games every Saturday.
Baylor is the team I want to be high on this year. They miss BYU and Iowa State, but they have to play Arizona State, Kansas State, at TCU, at Cincinnati. They got to play Utah, Houston, and their non-conference is Auburn and at SMU. So it's not necessarily like they could lose a couple non-conference games in there too. So I like Baylor a lot, but I'm not willing to go there yet. I haven't settled on this year's Iowa State.
Seems like Texas Tech too high profile to be your Iowa
No,
State this year?
if they're not preseason top 25, then they would still count. I think it's Utah, Baylor, or TCU, one of those three. That if you're shooting for the wild card, trying to find last year's Iowa State, it's one of those three, I think. So, all right, well there you go.
Yeah,
Dream road trip.
I was going to say Kansas with Jalen Daniels getting hot might qualify too.
I think they do too, but
yeah.
I'd put them in that group. That they count. Houston, Colorado would both count for sure. I don't know if they're good enough. I don't know if Kansas is good enough. But if Jalen Daniels is healthy and not turning the ball over, then they could be great with him at quarterback. So, all right, that about does it for us. Not a lot of news this week, but that's our Big 12 Dream Road Trip. We'll have another Conference Dream Road Trip for you next week on the show. Other than that, thumbs up, notifications on the YouTube page, Athlon Sports. And, of course, follow us all over the socials. Buy those magazines, athlonsports.com. For Steven, I am Braden. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.